The idea of a bad bank which ended up in cold freeze. What is bad bank? Why the idea of a bad bank is so tricky? Which are the options for Indian banks to deal with NPAs? GS Paper 3, Indian Economy and Issues Relating to Planning, Mobilization of Resources, Growth, Development and Employment. What is the context about? While the non-performing assets pile up, the government had to contend with a slowing economy, low inflation, global growth and little private investment. In the Finance Ministry, one of the proposals discussed then and apparently sounded out by the World Bank, was on forming a bad bank. The bad bank proposal had been put on the table because by 2001, gross NPAs had risen to Rs 70,000 crore, with public sector banks sitting on a mountain of toxic assets. This was a legacy of the aggressive lending that Indian banks had resorted to in the mid-1990s, after the economy had been opened up. What is bad bank? A bank set up to buy the bad loans of a bank with significant non-performing assets at market price. By transferring the bad assets of an institution to the bad bank, the banks clear their balance sheet of toxic assets but would be forced to take write-downs. Shareholders and bondholders stand to lose money from this solution, but not depositors. Banks that become insolvent as a result of the process can be recapitalized, nationalized or liquidated. Why the idea of a bad bank is so tricky? The argument against a bad bank was that it too could end up as a government bank. To set up a bad bank to deal with NPAs, the government must infuse more capital into the better performing PSPs. It should also create, through an Act of Parliament, an apex loan resolution authority for tackling bad loans at PSPs. Valuing the assets properly in the transfer between the existing banks, and having more leverage over bad borrowers than current banks, would be crucial for functioning of a bad bank. Which are the options for Indian banks to deal with NPAs? Seizing the assets pledged by the borrower and selling of those. But this typically involves large losses on loans as the assets have to be sold at steep discounts to their book value. Under RBI's Strategic Debt Restructuring (SDR) scheme, they can convert their loans into equity, acquire a majority stake in the firm, dislodge the promoters or management and bring in new promoters and management. But the scheme is yet to take off in India. Restructuring of loans by stretching out the period of payment, or waiving a portion of the loans, or reducing the interest rate on loans, or some combination of these. Since the managers are liable to charges of favoritism in a restructuring scheme, it has suffered policy paralysis. Selling the NPA at a discount to an asset restructuring company, though it involves a significant loss on loans, it will clean up the balance sheet.